So moving on now, we're going to go on to our video presentations. And just a reminder that I normally do, I'm going to be giving a package of Burmese colored thorn needles to both Don Shearer and Tom Ray for their videos and presentations today. And again, the needles come courtesy of Steve O'Neill and Andy Briggs of Burmese Colored Needles in England. And want to thank both of you for your generosity and look for their ad in the Antique Phonograph News. I get such positive feedback from people who receive these needles, and I've gotten a package myself and love them. They're really good, they're durable, fantastic sound. And we'll see if Tom can maybe put them out of business when he shows us how to make his own needles at home. So we're going to start a video with a video that Don Shearer's put together. And Don, could I have you unmute your microphone and maybe tell us a bit about how you came about creating the workbench that you put together, the turntable workbench, and how you decided to measure everything with modern equipment, and how you came about this.
Thanks, Mike. I'm simply did the video to document my own curiosity. I'm out of the broadcast industry, and we're used to measuring video, audio. After fully restoring several types of gramophones and upgrading many different reproducer diaphragms, I was curious if my time and effort really made any resulted in significant improvements in sound quality and level. I know enough about acoustics and hearing variances to know that sometimes your ears are less than perfect and can be unreliable devices to assess true quality and level of sound and music. My concerns were primarily regarding the replacements of mica diaphragms. Thus, I built this and documented this test bench. My intent is to test other diaphragm materials and isolation gaskets to result in better reproduction of all types of 78 RPM recordings.
Great. Okay. And so basically what you do is you're comparing the different types of reproducers on this bench.
Yes.
Great.
The spectrum analyzer that I use goes all the way from 20 hertz low end all the way up to 20,000 hertz high end.
Right. And I thought too, as I watched the video before, there was no horn attached to any of the reproducers, so that would make a difference in the end too, wouldn't it?
It would add to the level.
Right. Just the level?
The only way that I could do a side-by-side assessment was right out of the tone arm.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. So Mark, how about I have you queue up the video that Don put together?
And let me know if you don't hear properly.
Okay.
Let me know.
I have built a test bench to assess the performance of various types of tone arms and reproducers. Reproducers include diaphragms made of mica or corrugated aluminum and some other materials. These then are isolated from the main sound box by flexible gaskets. This restored Victrola 2 reproducer now has new mica diaphragm and new gaskets. One challenge in restoring reproducers is the ability to objectively assess the performance improvements. I use an audio spectrum analyzer from my earlier days of working in acoustic engineering and professional sound. Let's have a listen and a look at sound coming out of the tone arm. You will note that the Victor II reproducer with mica diaphragm is just energy between 4 and 4,000 hertz. Now let's have a look and listen to a reproducer with corrugated aluminum diaphragm. Note the improvement in frequency response and sound level.
But it really is so. Oh, I'm my own grandpa. Father's wife then had a son who kept them on the run, and he became my
You note that
grandpa.
orthophonic reproducer with the corrugated aluminum diaphragm has a much broader and best frequency response between 200 and 8,000 higher pressure levels as well.
If my wife is my grandmother, then I'm her grandchild. And every time I think of it, it nearly drives me wild. For now I have become the strangest case you ever saw. As husband of my grandmother, I am my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. It sounds funny, I know, but it really is so. Oh, I'm my own grandpa. Because although she is my wife, she's my grandmother too.
The Brunswick Altona soundbox equipped with mica diaphragm has fairly good frequency response between 400 and 6,000 hertz. Overall sound level is somewhat less than the Victor II orthophonic with the aluminum reproducer.
And every time I think of it, it nearly drives me wild. For now I have become the strangest case you ever saw. As husband of my grandmother, I am my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. It sounds funny, I know, but it really is so. Oh, I'm my own grandpa.
Hi, Don. Some of the talking, some of the comments that you made, I think were drowned out by the presentation itself. Could you maybe repeat some of what you said? You said something about the orthophonic, comparing it
Well,
to the Brunswick?
originally The Victor II reproducer with the mica diaphragm has its best response between 400, 4,000. The orthophonic reproducer is best between 200 hertz, so it goes much lower, and also up higher at 8,000 hertz. So the sound pressure level is also considerably higher. The Altona Brunswick is a fairly good sound box, and it's between 400 hertz and 4,000 and 6,000 hertz. So it's fairly good. I tested other diaphragm materials as well, such as 1 millimeter thick aluminum and 2-inch millimeter thick Tupperware plastic. But the best response that I had was from a plastic lid, a potato chip lid.
No.
And it had better response than the mica. So I've done a few with the Tupperware and the potato chip can tops. Yeah.
It would happen to be Pringles, would they?
It was a Lay's.
Oh, okay. Just in case everybody wants to run out and duplicate that. They know what, right?
It was an interesting experiment. Yep.
Yeah, I could see how it would be. I noticed, especially with the orthophonic, it seemed much louder. You could see the decibel ratings were much higher, and the frequency response, as you said, it seems a lot more evenly distributed. Yeah.
They were all done. The recording was done on a Decca 1935, electronically recorded.
Right.
And so they were all measured from by the same recording.
Great. Okay. And by now, probably some people know the words to "I'm My Own Grandpa."
Yes.
After hearing it so many times, but it's a great A/B comparison. Would anybody like to join in and make some comments on your observations of Don's video?
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure. Go ahead, Matthew.
I couldn't see. Maybe it was visible to some other people. I couldn't see. How did you produce the sound? What did you use for speakers?
There's no speakers. The sound is right out of the arm.
Out of the arm. Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I've got is the Altona. I've never seen one before, so thanks for that. I mean, I've never seen it in action before. I think it also plays vertical cut records as well. Did you use it to experiment with vertical cut records as well?
The Altona Brunswick Altona arm, this one that I have actually does 3. It'll do the path, the vertical, and the horizontal cut records.
Did you play any vertical cut records with it?
I did one, but it response was not very good. So I measured them all with the horizontal.
Because I remember at the time they were invented, people jumped up and down about them, but I've heard reports from collectors that they don't think the Altona was very good for vertical cut records.
Oh.
Now, there was a lot of political issues around it as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Some court challenges.
Oh. Lots of those. Any other comments? Don Mayer, go ahead. Oh, Don, we can't hear you. It's probably the dreaded microphone problem. Okay, unmute yourself, and then next to mute, it lists the microphones, a little arrow there, and try changing it. Now we got you. Now we lost you. Okay, try it again. We had you there for a second. Okay, you're muted. Still can't hear you.
How's that? Can you hear that?
Perfect.
Good, okay.
Great.
I'm curious about the potato chip lid compared to the orthophonic. I mean, according to the frequency response diagram that you got on your test meter there, it looked like it responded better. I think that's what I heard you say, but I'm kind of curious how that jives with your audio perception of the quality of the sound, because we know, you know, as a musician, I know that those two things are different, that sometimes your ears perceive something as sounding better or worse than what the instruments might otherwise tell you. What was your comparison just with your own ears of those two things?
It's very obvious improvements on the low end, on everything below 400 hertz was much better, and also higher frequency response above 6,000 hertz, quite good up until around 8,000 hertz.
So your perception is that the potato chip lid outperformed the orthophonic in terms of what you heard with your ears?
It was pretty close.
Wow.
It's pretty close. I'm doing a video actually of about 6 different materials and comparing a Tupperware plastic, which is 2 millimeter thick, to this potato chip lid, which is 1 millimeter, but it's got a fair bit of rigidity. It performs better than the mica. So there you go. But in those days, there was no potato chips, I guess, when mica was being used.
I guess the other comment I would have is anytime I see somebody replacing the mica diaphragm, and there are some rebuilders who do that as a matter of course, they always replace the mica diaphragm. But I also know from having used a micrometer on a variety of mica diaphragms back in the day that even though they look like they're for the same reproducer, in fact, there's variances in thickness, you know, just because of the way the mica is sliced. And I can't help but feel that a new diaphragm isn't automatically better than an old one, just because the thickness may not be the intended thickness when they design these things.
I found that over a variety of mica diaphragms, many of them are under 1 millimeter, and I have one that I did that the mica diaphragm was like closer to 2 millimeters. So there's quite a variance in the mica diaphragms.
Yeah,
Wow.
Thank you.
Good to know.
Don, I have a comment. I've been meaning to, I haven't got around to it yet, of going to the medical supply place and getting a diaphragm for a Littmann stethoscope. The larger, like the cardiologist would use a larger stethoscope, and it would be big enough to put in an exhibition reproducer. I keep meaning to do that, but I haven't done it yet. But that might be something you could try.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
I
Paul
think this.
here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. When I was quite young, I used to experiment around with all kinds of diaphragms, both in recording heads for making cylinders. And I'll tell you, there's an amazing difference in the way they perform. I have a Class M machine that has glass diaphragms, and there's a bunch of spare diaphragms with that machine. And I'll tell you, each one of those diaphragms behaves in a different manner.
Huh.
And I remember going down to see the Edison lab one time and seeing all the different recording heads that they had down in Orange, New Jersey. And they just kept going by trial and error. And there were certain ones that Billy Murray would record perfectly on, and other ones that were used for women, and then there'd have to be one for Billy Murray and Ada Jones, because the two of them would sing together on the same recording. I also got a Kent reproducer that was made probably about 1917, and it had a fabric diaphragm, and it looked as though it was some kind of almost a canvas that was what would you call it? A hardening material, you know, like you'd use for fiberglass or something like that. And it's interesting, all the different things that you can do with diaphragms, and there were a lot of interesting ones that were used in different reproducers over the years. And I used to find these things easily. Of course, that's the trouble with being in your 80s, you know, the happy days of collecting are gone, because you could find this stuff in people's garbage cans in those days. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in for what it's worth. But But also, well, the other thing is too, that a lot of these reproducers require a horn, and the horn loads the reproducer and makes it work harder. And you can prove that by, if you have a machine that's just barely capable of turning the record, if you play a record and it's slowing down, sometimes if you remove the horn, it takes the loading off the diaphragm and it makes it easier for the cylinder or disc to turn. So you know that by loading the thing with a horn, that you're putting extra work on the diaphragm. So I don't know how you fit that into these experiments, but it certainly is an issue. I'm sure of that.
The other issue is also the isolation, depending on the type of material that you use as the ring, and also then how tight that diaphragm is put together. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, you bet.
Mm-hmm. I have some recorders, Edison cylinder recorders, that are wonderful for lower frequencies, and others that are really good on higher frequencies. And I've never been able to figure out what it was that was the difference between them, you know, using the same recording horns and all that sort of thing. So diaphragms really are, you know, I think you spend the rest of your life studying these things. Anyway, thank you for what you've done there. That's great.
Great, thank you. I guess too, like with the discussion today, what we're seeing is probably what many of the engineers went through at the time 100 years ago and trying to find the best one to use. But at least from today's perspective, we've got the electronics where we can view it and see what the actual frequency response is and what the volume level is in comparison. So it's an advantage we have. So Don, you wanted to say something else?
I just said that the previous responder was making comment about the 80-year-olds. I'm 85, so don't put us down, eh?
I don't think he's putting anybody down. Okay, any other comments on this topic?
I have one comment about it.
Sure, go ahead, Jeremy.
It's a little bit like comparing apples and oranges, though, because this experiment, only one of the reproducers was really meant to do, you know, reproduce electric recordings. The other two weren't. So
that's correct.
If maybe they were all acoustic and we could compare the acoustic heads or all sort of orthophonic types, that might be another experiment to do. That'd be kind of cool to see. Because right now, the two acoustic ones sound very distorted just because there's a big load of electric audio in there.
Yeah, that's anyway. A lot of very
good point, Jeremy. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Well, Don, thank you very much. I've found it a fascinating comparison, and it seems like others in this today did too. It's a great way to compare it, and something I think we probably would take for granted, and not many people would think of comparing it. So thank you again for sharing the video with us.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay, Mark, I have to call on you that Richard's apparently he's texting me. He's having trouble getting into the meeting, and I don't know. Can you see him in?
Yeah, I got him here. He's in.
You got him in?
But so I wasn't sure whether to let him in, but I think we're okay. Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Richard, you're there? You're okay now? Okay, I'll leave it at that. All right, we're going to move on to our next video, which is actually one I found, and I found it quite interesting. It's a silent movie. All I can figure was made in probably the late teens or early 20s. And it's a very quick tour of a Pathé record pressing plant. And I think you'll find it interesting. Because it's silent, I'm going to narrate.
Can anyone hear me?
Hello? Yes, we can hear you, Richard. You're yelling.
Yeah, but it's a double thing. I don't know what to do.
I can sense your frustration. Richard, how about for now you mute yourself, because I'm doing the talking and we're doing the presentations. And so if you can see us and hear us, then you're doing as well as everyone else. Is that okay? What? Put your hand up or something if you can hear me. Great. Okay. And you can see us all right? Can you see my picture?
I can see a picture, but
Yeah, you're getting some kind of feedback. So, Richard, mute your microphone. Put mute on in the bottom left. Great. Okay, so Richard, you don't have to talk now. You just sit back and enjoy the show. You're doing fine. How about if you want to say something, Richard, send me a chat and I'll read it out to the group. Okay? Great. Okay, so I want to move on now with our presentation of the Pathé record plant. And where was I with this? So the film's undated. It's very, very brief. It's only like 3.5 minutes or something. And I think it's far too brief to take a tour of the process of making records. So I'll try to describe some of what you're seeing. I have a fairly good idea of how records are made myself because when I graduated from university in the 1970s, one of the dream jobs I thought I'd love to have would be working in a record pressing plant, and which is something I did for about half a year. It was called Precision Records, and they were in the east end of Toronto, and they made records for other manufacturers. So like if you bought, say, even a Beatle album or something like that, Precision probably made it for Capitol. And so things were made quite differently in the 1970s compared to what you're going to see in the 1920s. And I'll point some of these differences out as we go along with it. So Mark, I'll get you to cue up the video. And again, I'm going to be talking to show you some of what you're doing. And I've asked Mark, after the first title screens are in there, to pause the movie so I can point something out. So it's making a record. Hopefully you can all see this. So they're talking about making disc records, and Mark can get ready to pause it as soon as this shows right here. So thanks, Mark. They're showing an acoustic recording session. So we see the female singer singing into the horn. The engineer is to her left. They'll show a bit more of this. So he's sort of just standing there watching and balancing people, moving them back and forth. Musicians are in the background. What I'd like to draw your attention to is to the left of the screen. You'll see there's a crane horn going from the bottom of the picture to the top. And where the horn connects underneath on the apparatus, it's actually a cylinder. And Pathé did something different than most manufacturers at the time, say like Victor and Columbia and all them. They recorded directly onto the wax disc, whereas Pathé did it differently and recorded onto a master cylinder and then did dub recordings from the cylinders to the disc records or other cylinders that they may have sold at the time. So I just want to point out that that's a little different. So Mark, I'll let you go ahead and let the movie run now, and we won't stop it anymore. So you can see her singing away there. And again, because the cylinder is also spinning too, recording. So here they're saying the wax impression is graphited and placed in a special bath. Today, the blanks are recorded on a lacquer disc sprayed with silver nitrate, which bonds to it. The discs are then electroplayed to produce another copy from the stampers created. So in this case, they're dusting it with a graphite to make it electrically conducive so they can put it in the bathing tubs there. And this is where they're going to be plated, usually with a nickel bath. Here they say, I believe it's coming up that 12 hours, they call it the metal shell, is in the bath. And when I was working there, it only took a couple of hours to do that. You can see to the top right, the gauges, there's electricity going through there to create the electroplating process. So in this case, what they're going to do is separate the two. See, they'll peel them apart. And again, but because this movie is so abbreviated, I'm sure they cut out another step where they would start with a mother copy and then create an intermediate and then create stampers from that. But they seem to avoid all that. Now they're going to bathe them in a bath again and make the stamper copies. This is something totally different. A heavy steel backing plate is placed on this record. That was certainly not done when I worked there. probably due to the thickness of the shellac, they had to have a really stiff, rigid stamper. And look at the belt driving the equipment. Very dated. Here's the composition of shellac, lampblack, and clay, which is mix and process. This struck me when you watch how this glob of stuff is handled. They're squishing it out there, and you'll see the black all over the front of the poor guy who has to hold this. And I know just from experience, the smell of the melting shellac is just horrendous. It must have been awful to have to breathe that in all the time. And here you see they're flattening it out, again, to make it flatter and thinner so that it can be used in the pressing plants. So spread between the two master records, basically in the stampers under hydraulic pressure. And let's see, what I want to say about this? You'll see them put a blob of shellac. See how they're folding up the blob, putting it in the center of the stamper, and now they're pushing it out. The labels are placed manually, top and bottom. And this is different. It's like they've got like a box that they put it in, and they insert the whole assembly into the press. In modern pressing plants, this is all done automatically, where the composition, the vinyl, is fed by the machine. The labels are fed automatically. The stamper comes down, and it automatically trims it. So you can see it's an extremely manual process here. And there's the finished product. And that's the end of the movie. Unfortunately, it's too short. But I think it gives you a rough idea of what it was like in the 1920s and how they made the Pathé records with a very different process in some ways than what we would do today. Now the machines basically have a human just occasionally overseeing them, just make sure everything's going smooth. It's a totally automated process and the records just spit out on their own. There's lots of other videos out there about how records were made. There's one I came across about a Columbia pressing plant, and it goes for about 10 minutes. So I thought that was too long. And there's a great one in the 1940s about RCA, and it's very detailed. You may find that if you're looking for it. All these are on YouTube. But it was great that someone decided to film the processes at the time and preserve it for history. And I find it interesting in collecting records just to see how the 78s were originally made. Any comments from anyone?
I've got a question.
Sure.
Am I understanding correctly that, it was recorded on cylinder first. How on earth did it become a disc? How was it transcribed?
Yeah, this is Paul here, and I know all about that.
Well, Paul, you're the man to know today. Go ahead.
It was pantographed, and you couldn't really tell, but the cylinders, the reason that the Pathé records advertised that they had 60% more overtones in them was that the cylinder was spinning at about 300 RPM.
Wow.
It was going very, very fast. So that would mean that high frequencies wouldn't be jammed together too tightly. So once you got the cylinder made, then you'd have to go through the process that they were showing there with the cylinder to make what would be like a Lambert cylinder in order to use it, in order to pantograph. So I don't know whether people know what a pantograph is.
Can you explain the pantograph?
The pantograph is a system of levers that you put the master record so that there's a playback stylus on that, and on the other end of the stylus bar, well, halfway across, of course, there's a pivot point. Okay, halfway across this, or right on the other end of the stylus bar, there's a cutting stylus. And the reason Pathé did it was that they could offer the same piece of music in various formats, so that you could get one that was 9 inches, or you could get one that was 11.5 inches, or you could get one that was 14 inches. And I've got in my collection some of the same pieces of music on different formats, but of course they sound best on the 14-inch format. And they did make for a very brief time some 20-inch ones, which of course they're hopeless because you lift them up and they just break because of their own weight, you know, like breaking the Titanic in half, you know, and it went down. So anyway, that's why they did that, and that's how they could advertise that they had, that there were more, that they had captured more of the higher frequencies that other manufacturers couldn't get because they weren't using this. So what they were doing is recording on cylinders at a very, very high speed so that they would get a really detailed engraving of the sound. And then you'd use those cylinders to make different discs. So that's the part they left.
But how
out
did
of
you get the
movie. That's
how
the
did you
part
get
I wanted to see.
But how did you get the information directly from the disc, from the cylinder onto the disc? I mean, it's
With
hard
the
for me to imagine.
pantograph. It was with the pantograph. It was a lever system that you know, so it was like what you got in the sound was a negative. Okay. And so what they were able to do actually was that they could record either, you could have center start records. I have some Pathes that are center start, and I have the absolutely identical performance on rim start records running at totally different speeds. Because this is the maddening thing about Pathe. You've got to figure out. You often find where on one side it's recorded at 60 RPM, let's say, but you put the other side on and it's about 84. So, you know, you've got to be a bit of a musician. And if you know the piece, like I think the one I'm thinking of here is the Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony. I've got a recording of that. And I've got a center start version, which is 2 discs, and a rim start version, which is 2 discs. But the second of those discs, you know, it looks as though the part that's at 60 revolutions a minute, they've only used a little bit of the disc on the thing. It's crazy. I don't know what they were thinking. They could have really improved the sound quality if they'd run the master at a different speed. So, I mean, the original master was all the same, you know, they were all done at 300 RPM. So it was a bizarre way of making records, but by God, you can hear a lot of stuff. And there's an article in an old Caps magazine of how you can play Pathe Hillendale records on an orthophonic Victrola. And that's a really interesting thing to do. And you can hear stuff with the orthophonic reproducer that you would never hear with a regular Pathe reproducer. You can hear, you know, music stands crashing and stuff like that.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff that's hidden on those records. Yeah.
Mark, you want to explain?
Yeah, I just pulled up on the internet a picture of a record being dubbed. So there's the black record being graphically transferred to another cylinder. So it's a playing stylus on one cylinder attached to a cutting stylus on the other cylinder and cutting a record.
Is this old equipment or somebody made that?
I have a feeling it's old equipment, but I've only pulled up the image.
Yeah, nice. It does look old, doesn't it?
Yeah, so something like that.
So basically, to sum up pantograph, my understanding is it's a mechanical system where one stylus is playing the original record, and then that there's a connection to a cutting stylus on the bar to cut the other record. That's all mechanically connected.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the other thing that's interesting about it is that the center start Pathes were dubbed onto the masters or the disc master backwards. They played them backwards. They started at the outside of the record, because how the hell would they have ever known that to end it just a quarter of an inch from the edge of the record? They always end a quarter of an inch from the ends of the record. And if you look at the record carefully, the disc, you can see quite often little bounce marks where they have lowered the cutting stylus and it has bounced a couple of times.
Huh.
And that's the giveaway about where they started it, you know? Yeah, so.
Fascinating. Do we know, were any of the original 300 RPM cylinders ever kept? They must sound really good.
I don't know.
There's a picture of a Bettini one there, and you can see the master cylinder there, and then it can make 3 copies at once.
Wow.
Ah, look at that. Wow.
Very clever.
And it's belt driven.
Another variance to this, Mike, is in the early days of broadcast transcription recorders. I restored a 1929 RCA transcription turntable used in broadcast. And during the 40s, they did a fair bit of reproducing, transcribing on the 33 and the third speed. So there was quite a variance of speeds and of devices and methods that were used.
Yep.
Right. Thank you. Any other comments from anyone?
Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now, Richard.
Great.
It sounds perfect.
I'm so sorry about any inconvenience I caused you guys. I'm really sorry.
No problem. Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Will do.
Thank you.
I was going to say that it looked like so manual. I can understand why records were so expensive, because it seems like almost all of it's done by hand.
Yes. Yeah. And the video I watched of the Columbia pressing plant, there was another step that they had in the process, because it was, in the 20s, Columbia had a very rigid center core, and then they called it fine leaves of expensive plastic on top as the playing surfaces. Well, they had to manually put all that together in the pressing plant, plus the labels, align it all up, and then push it into the plant. Like, it's a long, busy process. So it's no wonder why the records sold for $1 a piece at the time.
I have a comment or a question. When they took the very putty-like black stuff and put it in between the two plates, squished it together, and it went from being that, it seemed like rather quickly being able to be separated and hold its own shape without being all floppy. Was it heated in the press as well, or cured or something, or did they just speed it up?
They use steam.
Okay.
And in fact, if you go to the what was the Brunswick building in Toronto, the stack is still there from the steam plant for the pressing plant. It's still there to this day. And that's one of the problems, is that there's been a lot of interest for record collectors to reproduce 78s, because we've got the masters around in a lot of cases, or the stampers. But the problem is how to do that in shellac. And it's been done a lot in vinyl. I've got a lot of test pressings, for example, in vinyl from 1920s jazz recordings.
Wow.
But no one's done it in shellac yet. And the reason is because of all of the vinyl stuff is all done using this newfangled thing called electricity. Whereas in those days they used steam. And there's no equipment that I know around in the world for making records in shellac using steam.
Wow.
There must still be somebody producing steam somewhere, though.
Yeah, but not a steam powered pressing machine. That's the trouble.
Yeah. The blue Amberol records were all done with steam.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, they were inflated with a bag or something inside them that had steam.
Yeah.
And I forget how long they had to be pressed, but you had to leave the steam on for quite a little while on each one. It wasn't just instantaneous.
Well, perhaps we should be speaking to the steam show that we might go to later this year.
The same thing. Don Colvin, where are you? Maybe you can help us out with this.
You need
yeah, I'm here. There is plenty of steam at the show, as much as you could possibly want. So bring your masters and a bag of shellac.
Incidentally, Mike, I've been to that steam show a couple of times. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It's really a fun show and very, very interesting.
And it's not just steam engines; it's everything, right?
Yes, there's steam engines, tractors, vintage cars, models, and actually on the grounds at Hume's auction, where it is now, they just redid the model track. So at the front, there's scale, 7-inch scale model locomotives that you can get rides on and stuff. So good family outing.
And from some pictures I saw of it before, I remember seeing, I think somebody was playing cylinder records there, and it's like there were gramophones. It's like there's just a variety of everything old.
Yes, that's
Vintage.
the intention. Yeah, the show, depending on the years, has had more or less of different things, but it would be terrific to have caps at the show.
Yes,
as we would benefit from it in exposure, and they would definitely benefit from the knowledge and seeing these machines.
Excellent.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of us types who will say, "Oh yeah, I had one of those when I was young." So get prepared to hear the same thing over and over. But other than that, fun show.
Awesome, thank you. Any other comments about the record pressing process in the film, or no? Okay. Well, I hope you found it interesting. As I came across that video again, the thing that I was upset about was it was just so short. It was too highly edited. It must have been a lot longer at one point, but that's all that's available at this point. But again, at least we do have that part of the video to watch. Okay, so I was going to move on now to the video produced by Tom Ray, and he's going to show us how he makes homemade bamboo needles to play on his phonographs. Tom, how about you unmute yourself and give us a little introduction about the video and maybe how you came across this process and anything else you want to add?
Okay, well, I think I mentioned in the video about how I got it. Then there's a fellow named Alex Kirtley who has a YouTube channel into gramophones, and he showed how to sharpen bamboo needles without the use of the little clipper sharpener thing. So I thought, well, if you can do it that way, it just looks simple enough. I just found some bamboo in the backyard that we'd been using to hold up tomatoes or something, and just started, look at a few little clips or information on the web, and then ended up buying some more bamboo very cheaply and just started doing it from there. Oh, another thing too, don't send me any thorn needles.
Oh, okay.
I have plenty, so I should actually send you some bamboo needles so you can distribute those as well.
No, maybe that's a great idea. Thank you. Thanks for the offer. So a big question is, you said that you went and bought some more bamboo. Where do people buy this?
My wife was just out and about, and she was at the dollar store.
Oh. And
I think I even show it, like they're 5-foot long piece for $1.50. And she bought me 2 of them. So like I have bamboo like forever now.
You're set for life.
Yeah, yes.
Well, I said before, if you ever want to retire, you can go in the bamboo manufacturing business.
Yeah, we'll see.
Needle business. But again, from what I recall of the video, it is very labor intensive too. There's a lot of cutting. So
yeah, a little bit, yes.
Okay. So Mark, how about we'll start Tom's video?
Yeah, just give me a second to queue up the screen. I'm getting a notification that I've got an unstable connection. So if it freezes, I'll be back when Rogers lets me. Hold on a second.
Looks good.
Here's a little video about how I make bamboo needles. Bamboo needles are also referred to, sometimes you'll see them as fiber needles. So they're triangular in cross section, and they're made to fit into the triangular hole of a reproducer. So this is the raw material I use for my bamboo needles. The very first ones I made, I just had a piece of bamboo from the backyard that had been used to hold up flowers or tomatoes or whatever for many years, and it worked fine. But then my wife was out and about, and at Dollarama she found 2 5-foot lengths of bamboo, and a decent diameter as well, for $1.50 each. So I'll have raw materials to make needles for a long time. And I was first inspired to do these because I saw a video by Alex Kirtley on YouTube, he just showed how to sharpen bamboo needles without a cutter, because there are special cutters. You can put the needle in and give it and cut it, but he just uses a piece of emery paper or sandpaper, and that made me think, well, I could make some if I don't need a cutter. So that's what got me started. So when I go about making these, the first thing I do is I color the outside of the bamboo just for reference, because the outer rind is harder than the inner part, and I just do that so it's easier to identify the outer bit from the inner bit once I have them cut into little wee tiny pieces. Okay, so I cut them these pieces about 3/4 of an inch long. And so the way we're going to cut this is, if this is a piece of bamboo here, we're going to make some diagonal cuts through there. And the yellow bits are marked, those are the parts that will become the needles, and the rest is just waste, the offcuts. I've heard of some people using that part for needles, but I've not had luck with that. So once we get it cut, so what you're trying to do is to cut it in triangular shapes, roughly equilateral, and about 60 degrees-ish. So that's not the good end, and either of those could become the tip. And so either that would ride in the groove there, or that will ride in the groove there. So I start out, zoom it up a bit, just take one of those, into it. I'm trying to form about a 60-degree angle there. That's an offcut. We'll deal with that later. And then I'm doing, imagine the size of the hole in the reproducer, and then I'm just cutting that bit off right there. So there we end up with this nice little triangular bit. And then your next cut will be to remove the waste bit again. And then that will be for another needle. So if you do cut one that's a bit too big, say that big, and that's too big to fit into the reproducer, you can just make another cut. You have to do it carefully because it's so tiny, but make another cut there and then you'll end up with that. So all is not lost if you cut it too big. So I made a couple of these out of chunk of 2x4, make it easier to see. So this is our fiber needle, and so what you do is you bevel the edge that way to get, so your point will be down there, and that's the way it fits into the record. Now, so imagine this is the groove, this is a record, so the hole would be on this side. When I first made them, I thought I was being clever, and I put the rind on the outside because I figured since the groove of the record is actually pushing the needle over, I thought the harder part should be on this side. But then I read something that somebody said, no, it should be on the inside, and somebody else said it doesn't matter. And so I tend to make them this way, but I've tried them both ways, because sometimes I'll make a point and go, oh, I did it the wrong way. It still works. So either one. The only thing you don't want to do is use this corner for the business end, as long as it's that way or that way. There we go. Either one of those will be fine. Okay, now for making the point, so here's a couple of blanks that we just made. So when I grind the point, I used to always use the grinding wheel, either on the side or on the face. And that does a pretty quick job, but it's not really necessary. Yeah, so you don't need a bench grinder in order to make the tip. You can just use a piece of, in this case it's 220 sandpaper. It doesn't take many passes. Usually just push, because if you pull this way it might dislodge fibers from the end, and you want them all to stay nicely intact. That's looking nice. And you can then use, this is 400 grit. I usually use 320 for everything, but this is just what I happen to have around here. There, so that's not a bad point. Here, we'll see if we can get a close-up. Yeah, there we go. So here's another little tip. When you cut these with the blade, sometimes the side is a bit ragged. There's loose fibers on there. So either before or after you form the tip, I just got it over a block of wood, usually just over the side of a table, just to give my hand some clearance. I just give it a few passes on there and there, just to stop those errant fibers from becoming a nuisance. Okay, so that's basically it. Let's go listen to some music. So I have just mounted a bamboo needle that I just made in the reproducer, and we'll give it a try. This is an electric motor.
Excellent, Tom. Questions, comments? Come on, I know somebody's got questions out there. You want to say something?
I have a comment. I have a comment, Mike.
Go ahead.
I thought that was a very interesting film. Amazing how we are able to make those needles like that with that red wood. I really think he's a very, very well talented guy.
I fully agree.
I have a question, Tom. So
Go
if
ahead,
I
Tom.
grind them on my bench grinder, then you would still sand them afterwards, or will the bench grinder do a good enough job?
I usually run it over the sandpaper briefly just to do it. And then of course for resharpening, it's just on the sandpaper each time, because I should have taken a real close-up of the tip after it's used, but you almost can't tell it's been used. Like it's so, it just barely takes the tip off it. So then I just use it run it on the sandpaper again to sharpen it. And
so how sharp is sharp, like compared to a sewing needle?
Well, it wouldn't poke you like a sewing needle would or anything, but yeah, just try to make it as sharp as you can, just visually.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I'm totally doing this afternoon. I'm heading to the workshop the minute the meeting's over. This is fun.
It's nice to have a little jeweler's loop like this.
I have.
Okay, oops, daisy, and so that you can see the point nicely through one of those. So.
Is there an angle that you're going for, like a degree angle?
No, and again, some people said, oh, if it's a little blunter, it'll make it stiffer and louder, but I don't know, I just go for it. Is it maybe 60 degrees? Or I can't even.
Okay.
60 degrees everywhere. Any angle you make it 60 and you should be okay.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, that'll keep me from doing what I should do this afternoon.
There you go. You needed another project, Don.
Always.
Yeah, keep you busy. Tom, I was wondering, how many plays do you get out of each needle? Is it like basically one play per needle and then you resharpen it, or?
It depends. Like some records, I find Columbias for thorns or for these, older Columbias, especially acoustic Columbias, they're really hard on them. And if the record's not in as good a shape, it's more abrasive. So sometimes it won't even make it through one. But I've also played like 4, 5, 6 sides.
Really?
It's a really nice record, and it's, you know, say piano and cello, or like the Helen Ludolph thing. There's not a lot of really loud passages. It'll last for a long time. And of course, each needle is different. It's just organic material. So you might have one that's a bit softer than another. So.
Great. Other questions or comments from anyone?
Oh, it's a Norman here.
Go ahead, Norman.
I'm just wondering, I saw the extension that he had on the tone arm. I was wondering what the purpose of that was.
I was waiting for a comment about that.
Yeah, I got into thinking about the tracking of the records and the angle that the diaphragm, or the way the needle is riding in the groove, and what comes right from what came from the factory wasn't very good. So I've done a number of things like that. So the extension makes it track better, and then I had to, because that bit of copper that I resized to fit has a bit of a few, weighs an ounce or two, whatever. So that's when I built the counterweight to go on using, just made that out of steel. And I think a grip holder from a mountain bike or something like that, that just happened to fit. So
brilliant.
Yeah, so I'm kind of into that now, and I just bought a metal lathe, so I'm going to be doing more stuff. And yeah, so
I've heard of that procedure being done before, because apparently the tracking error was quite bad on a lot of the early phonographs, and that's what people are trying to correct now. And Tom, it might be a topic for a whole new video in the future.
Yeah, because an original, like my Victrola 6 VV6 here that's sitting beside me, the tracking error is like, between 14 and 20 degrees, and then I've built various things for it that takes it down to between 0 and 2 degrees. So
wow,
I don't know, is it really? The guys who invented them and did it were clever, and they didn't seem to think it was worthwhile. But I don't know. If you look at the Talking Machine forum, which I'm sure a lot of us do, Graham Rankin has a lot of stuff on tracking. If you just look on record tracking and all sorts of stuff, he goes down to the hundredths of a degree and things like that.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Anybody else want to say something? Richard, I noticed your microphone. Well, hold on. Wait a second. Richard, your microphone is not muted. Thank you. Someone else is speaking up?
Yeah, it's Paul.
Hi, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got an orthophonic Victrola here, and I think we'll see if I can somehow show you I don't know which way to turn this darn thing. Yeah. But I've got an adjustable counterweight on the head, which helps a whole lot with record wear. Can you see it at all?
Yes.
Now we can.
Yeah, okay. Well, you see, I can move that weight one way or the other, and I use that for when I'm playing Pathé records on there. It takes a lot of the weight off, and you can. It's amazing how much difference that thing makes as to needle wear and record wear and everything else. It's really great.
And Paul, where do we get one of those?
Well, you make it.
Aha.
Yes.
I'll take the thing off and show it to you. I'll just lift it off. It's not hard to make. You have to have a lathe. Everybody should have a lathe. If I hold it up, can you?
Yeah, it looks great.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just make a little hook. It's I think it's about a piece of 1/4-inch rod, and a nice knurled nut that I got from somewhere. It was brass, and a chunk of 3/4-inch brass stock. And see, I can move it from one end to the other to change the weight. And it really is a handy thing to make. And you can take it off instantly if you don't want to use it. Yeah. So that saves wear.
I found it interesting playing with the Altona, with the Brunswick Altona arm and head, that the weight shift makes quite a bit of difference, particularly on some needles and some recordings. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it does. And not only that, but the Brunswick's arms have a little screw and a nut underneath where you can actually extend the arm out and back. You can change the length of it from the fulcrum point at the back where it's swiveling. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Which helps with the tracking error.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Well, looks to me like if somebody wants a part-time job making some of these things, there's definitely a demand for it. Anyway, any other comments from anyone? No? Okay. Tom, thank you very much. It was very informative. I'm sure everyone enjoyed that. I never would have thought of making needles out of that piece of bamboo, but I'm going to start looking in my garden to see what I got now. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last video. And this is a follow-up to Jeremy Hopkins' presentation from the last meeting. He showed us a beautiful Victor Electrola RE57 from about 1930. And this machine was really state-of-the-art in its day. I mean, it was one of the first Electrolas, they call them, which is basically an electronic phonograph hooked up to a radio, and just did everything that you could want in a day. Besides playing records, it could record them too. And so Victor saw this as sort of like a whole additional feature that they could push, and several of their machines did offer it for several years in the early 1930s. And they actually created a record for the salesman to help the salesman sell it to the public. And so what we're going to be doing is playing a YouTube video of the record. And anyone who has seen the record always makes comment of the way the announcer refers to Victor. It's a Victor. You'll hear him say over and over, the Victor Talking Machine Company. It's kind of funny in that way. So Jeremy, how about I have you put yourself on full screen? And I think you have some examples of the records too, because I remember you showed them last time.
Yeah. Did you put me on full screen already? Or?
Yep, you're there.
Okay.
Take it away.
Well, I have some examples of the, these are the 6-inch discs that people used to record on. They're pre-grooved.
Right,
and you put this on the RE57 or any of those radio Electrolas, and you put an additional weight on top of the Cobra head reproducer, which was heavy itself already. And then that would electrically leave an impression in the grooves. And it was a little bit weaker than, actually cutting a record with a blade or any of those later cutting machines. But it was a lot easier for people to record on. So you get a lot of things happening that never happened before, like people getting air checks and people recording things off the radio that have been preserved that normally wouldn't. Like if somebody didn't do an actual transcription, it just was lost to time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of recordings of radio shows and programs that have been preserved by people discovering these little discs, which are only a little snapshot, but a lot of times people will record and then flip it over and record another. And so yeah, a lot of things have been discovered that way because of it. And it was very popular at the time. They did full color ads in tons of magazines telling everyone about these radio Electrolas and how great they were. And they sold for quite a bit of money back in 1930. Great Depression just hit and they wanted $285 for them. So there weren't too many people that could afford that sort of thing, but eventually it became used by quite a few people as time went on. And the record that Mike was talking about, I actually do have a copy of that. There's How to Sell Victor Recording, or you can't really see it there very well. How to Sell Victor Home Recording, Part 1, and then on the other side, Part 2. And it's, as he said, a lot of people do comment on him saying Victor through the whole record, and he's telling everyone how these aren't going to be as great as our amazing Victor recordings that people all know and love, but people can fool around with it and, you know, record their own sort of little messages to each other. They'd actually provide a mailer with these records that you could send to your friends with one of these little Victor home recording needles, because these were about 7 mil wide. It wasn't a typical needle, so you had to send one along that people could insert into their own gramophone or phonograph and be able to actually play it back, because it was such a wide groove. You can't play this back on a standard, even if you use the 78 needle on a modern phonograph, you can't really hear anything because it just doesn't hit the walls at all. You have to sort of get a custom stylus to get it to play, which I haven't done yet, but I do want to do, because I've got some of these records that do say they have something on them, but I haven't heard them yet. So
you may have to use a dynamic cartridge on that. In the early days of Victor in broadcast, when they came out with the transcribers units, these were on 18-inch discs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They then were required to be played with the dynamic cartridge.
Well, that's another project I'll do soon. Got too many right now, but that does. Thanks for telling me about that, though.
Good to know.
So I guess if you want to play the record now, Mike.
Yes, let's go for that.
Okay, let me just cue it up.
We'll get to hear him say all the Victors.
Please see that all the salespeople in your store hear and study this record. Will you call them together right now, please? The purpose of this special Victor record is to help you sell home recording as a feature of the new Victor instrument. There's a right way and a wrong way to sell home recording. It can be made a powerful factor in instrument sales and profits, or, if improperly handled, it can be discounted as a selling factor. In the first place, don't allow yourself or your customer to expect too much of home recording. The natural attitude will be to expect records as good as standard Victor recordings, because people have been taught by Victor advertising to think of quality when they think of Victor. Explain that home recordings made by amateurs under haphazard conditions and with very simple equipment can hardly be compared with Victor records made by the best talent in the world in laboratories costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, with recording experts and costly equipment. Then, emphasize the fun of making your own records. Don't be too serious about it. Get this idea across to your customer. Mrs. Jones, these little inexpensive records are really snapshots of your voice. You can have more fun with a $2 Kodak than you could with a $3,000 portrait camera. And in just the same way, you can enjoy Victor home recording. You don't expect a snapshot to equal a portrait, but you'll have a great deal of pleasure in making snapshots. You could follow up this idea by pointing out that home recording serves almost exactly the same purposes in its field as a snapshot does in its own way. Every party, every incident that is pleasant to remember can be made permanent with home recording. The children's birthday parties, babies' prattle, youngsters playing their first piece on violin, piano, or other instrument. Family gatherings and similar occasions all cry out for recording. Weekly letters to young people away at school, birthday and other greetings can take the far more effective and personal form of Victor home recordings. Specially amusing bits from favorite radio programs offer another opportunity for home recording. Now turn the record over and get some more ideas. Now, of course, the way to sell any Victor instrument is by demonstration. To demonstrate home recording, you must have ready, right on the tip of your tongue, some reasonably interesting remarks. Unless you are prepared, you will be awkward and tongue-tied when you pick up that microphone in front of a stranger. I've tried it, and I was as dumb as a wooden Indian. So be prepared. When you get to the point of actual demonstration, you will naturally ask the customer to make a record. The chances are 10 to 1 that he will refuse at first and say, "No, you make one." Here's a suggestion for your demonstration record. This is one of the first Victor home recording records made in, name your town. It is being played on the Victor Radio Electrola RE57, which combines the world's finest radio with its 5 circuits, screen grid radiotrons, and micro-synchronous tuning with the new Electrola, the instrument that brings records to life and life to records. I am presenting this record to, name your prospect, as a souvenir of his or her introduction to the new 1931 Victor radio. This is Mr. John Adams of Adams Music Store, 581 Main Street. Memorize this little talk so that you can recite it without hesitation. Remember that the customer will take it home and play it for his friends, thus giving you a free and valuable advertisement. Remind him that the record can be played on the orthophonic Victrola as well as the Electrola, provided the special needle for home recorded records is used. Then get the customer to make a record on the reverse side of the recording blank. We have supplied you with a card on which a number of suggested talks for the customer are printed. The prospect will not hesitate to read a message, even if he can't think of an original one offhand. Show him the appropriate copy for him to read, and the big kick he will get out of hearing his own voice come back to him will have a powerful influence in getting a sale. If he says it doesn't sound like his voice, remind him that no one knows what his own voice is like, which is a scientific fact. In recording radio, select the quietest station within range, remembering that station noises and static, as well as the music, will be recorded. Sell home recording hard, but don't oversell it. As far as it goes, it is a masterpiece, but it isn't the heart of the instrument. It's an extra dividend Victor is paying to those who buy 1931 Victor radio.
I guess we have to put it in perspective too that maybe some people have been used to recording their own voices on cylinder machines, and then as the progression to disc came along, you could no longer do that. So it seemed like a great invention at the time. Jeremy, is there anything else you want to add about the process or anything you picked up along the way?
There's not too much more about the process. I kind of wish that when I did find it, I found discs with it, because it would have been nice to hear the voice of the person who originally owned it. And I did that whole presentation on him. I have a lot of his stuff. I just don't have his voice, which, you know, I scoured that house and there was just nothing. So
shame.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, and other than that, I do want to be able to reproduce some of the ones that I do have and record them digitally so that, you know, I can share what you know, there's some recordings of people in Christmas in 1930s and Radio Orphan Annie. There's and some Dick Tracy and some other little things here and there. And I'm interested really in the radio broadcast, because some rare broadcasts have been found that way, where just out of the blue, you know, they found a famous Duke Ellington recording and nobody ever heard it before.
Nobody knew about it. Yeah.
So
right.
Would be cool to find that down the road one day.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Thanks. I'm reminded of the home recording that was in one of our CAPS auctions about 6 months ago from Jen Hodge of was it King George V or something like that, when they came to Canada. And I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but it could be the only copy of that recording that somebody just happened to make off the air. So lots of stuff out there. And I think you mentioned once last time, or somebody else said that there's a company that's manufacturing the blanks again because the vinyl gets pretty hard over all these years and wouldn't work.
Yes, somewhere in the West Coast, I think it's in California. I don't recall the name of the company offhand, but they make blanks for so many different formats.
That's great.
And this is one of them apparently. And that's one thing about when they were brand new and the vinyl was nice and soft, it would record well. But now it's hardened and there's no way you can really record on these blanks, even if they're blank.
Right.
Yeah. Even if you had a really hard stylus and very heavy on it, it would probably just break the grooves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I always found it a fascinating snippet of the recording industry itself, and just the way it was sold. The record was so clear in that, like, don't expect the same results as you get from a professional record, but it is a snapshot of it.
Yeah,
it was good in that regard. And,
they're definitely snapshots. You're not really going to record too much on that much. I think it even does run at 33. So I don't know if this one. I think this one does. Yeah, and is there early experiments with vinyl as well,
Right.
on different compositions. So there's a lot of innovations there that weren't done before that have just sprang on the market.
Right.
Jeremy, that record you played, you showed, the home recording. How big are they?
They're 6 inches wide.
Yeah, well, they do come in 10 inches.
Well, they do. This is the early version of it. It had a white label.
Yeah.
And then later on, they did come out with the 10-inch version.
Orange label.
I do have one here somewhere. They also had the 6-inch orange label too.
Yeah.
Later on, like towards the end of the middle of the 30s, they came out with those.
Yeah, I've got several swing bands from the sort of 1935 period, maybe.
Oh.
And I've also got some blanks.
Oh,
and I've even got, because they were issued in the US, but there was also a Canadian one, and I've got several of those.
Oh.
So they were sold here with their own label.
Colin, how do you play back the records?
They're just on my normal 78 player.
No, but do you use a wider stylus, or
I use I use the widest I've got. Yeah, it's not the best of quality, but
it works.
It works. A lot of it depends on, of course, how it was recorded.
Yes.
And I don't even know if it necessarily actually cuts. All it actually does is kind of distort the plastic. I won't want to call it vinyl. It just kind of distorts it to make the sound, rather than actually cutting it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's because it's a pre-groove.
Right.
And I understand it was called Vitrolec.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
or Vitrolec.
As far as what you could record at home through, it was just a small little microphone, little carbon microphone, so you wouldn't really get great quality. You'd probably get much better quality just recording straight off the radio.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I've got one that it's full again.
We have two people talking about it. Don, why don't you go ahead?
Jeremy, thank you for that. I found that very interesting. One of the keepsakes that I have is, as a 12-year-old, I was recorded with a group at a camp. One of the counselors brought one of these machines, and we recorded, and it was on a 10-inch disc, and it's a keepsake that I have as when I was 12 years old.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Somebody else wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's Paul here. I have an RE82 that my father bought.
That's right.
And I was just going to let you have a look at it. It has a microphone that's a carbon button microphone in it that's attached to the machine permanently. And if you can just give me a minute, go on with something else, and I've got to just get to it.
Okay, go ahead, do your thing.
Maybe while Paul is going, Mike, maybe I could show you. It may have been mentioned, Jeremy might have mentioned that not only the Victor, but there are many other companies, of course, over the years that did this type of thing. And I just have over there the Hollywood Talkie Tone Victor record.
Oh.
With a personal message for you, and it's saying here, recording made the movie way, and it came with its own envelope once you've made the recording to send out. It came with an inner sleeve, which is a bit sexier because it's dark and it's got the nice kind of look to it, Hollywood movie tone. And
looks nice.
They provided the little needles as well, trademark to the Hollywood talkie tone. And the one that I have has a blue label on it, and it's got some early country recordings on it, Railroad Blues and the Wreck of the 97. So I'm sure I may have missed it earlier, but I'm sure there's dozens and dozens of companies out there that would have done the same thing with varying quality. Victor have more than likely being one of the better quality ones issued out there.
So Chris, is that that plastic material? It's not an acetate.
It is a plastic material because it's got some bend to it, Colin.
Yep. Okay.
So it's got interesting enough. It does have like a matrix number stamped into it.
Oh.
Even though this would have been a home recording of some kind, obviously the original plastic has some type of a identifier on it.
Interesting.
That's really neat.
And Chris, that's a 78? Chris, that was a
yes,
78?
It runs at 78. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, there's also aluminium disc recordings.
Got a few of those, yeah.
And they were very early too. In fact, I've got some incredible stuff of Connie Boswell with the Castlehome Orchestra from 1932.
Wow.
Completely unknown.
Great. I do have a few other random home recording style records like that in my collection too, and one of mine is actually one of those aluminum ones that you're just talking about. This one came from the Empire State Building. So when you're at the top of the Empire State, you could record your voice and like say, "I'm at the top of the Empire State Building," and then that was pretty much it. And then you take it home. But yeah, I guess this is more of a cutter though.
I don't think so, actually. No, I think it's the same principle. Because it's soft, it just kind of distorts, the sound distorts the groove.
Cool.
So I don't know if if these things were pre-grooved though. I don't know that. I'd be interested to know.
What about age 2?
Don Shira might have a comment where that's concerned. That these early aluminium discs, or as you guys call it, aluminum. Incorrectly, but anyway.
There's only one eye. There's only one eye.
We know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Do you have any comments, Don, on the very early aluminium disc recordings? Were they pre-grooved or were they cut?
They were cut.
Yes.
And they did some with the pre-groove as well. But the early transcribers of Victor or RCA then came out for the broadcast industry on the 18-inch recordings. This is when the great Gildersleeve dramas were on radio. Those were all cut with blank poly. Yeah. This is the disc, by the way, that I have of when I was cut when I was a 12-year-old, and it's a keepsake.
I'm sure it would be. Lance, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it's lost somewhere now, but when I was about 18 months old, I have memories back to before I was 2. My parents were in New York, and I was at the top of the Empire State Building, and I remember it being lifted up to this machine, and we recorded a record of me talking to my aunt, and we sent it back home to Canada to my aunt. And for a while it was around the house. I don't know what happened to it, but it was a metal disc, probably aluminum, but it had a black finish on the play side. So I don't know whether it was a plastic surface on aluminum, but it was definitely cut or deformed, whichever way, on the machine right there, because they gave it to us immediately. They pulled it off, and at the age I was, I wouldn't understand the details of what I was seeing, but I remember being lifted up and talking into the machine, and then getting the disc and the envelope. And then for a while it was around, so there's perhaps another technology there as well.
It was cut, and it would have been a lacquer, or sometimes they're called acetates, but yeah. I think officially they're called lacquers, and in fact they still use that for making masters now. If you're making an LP.
The name of that one
you wanted to add?
Oh yeah, the name of that one would have probably been a voiceograph, something like that.
Something like that, except it was one-sided, and it was
okay.
on the back.
Cool. And you were talking Empire State Building. I do have one of these one of these Victor home recording records, but this one's actually from Radio City, the big RCA building. So it was the same technology. They repackaged it and just put a new label on it, but it's exactly the same type of disc. And on the back of their envelope, they have some advertising for some of their players. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Neat.
So a lot of random things like that I've collected over the years.
Paul, you wanted to show us something?
Yeah, I don't know whether you can see it or not.
We can see you.
Yeah, you can see me.
I can see your face.
All right. Now, all I can do is hold it like that. Can you see this machine at all?
Maybe
too dark. And
no, we can see it.
And here's the microphone. There's the microphone.
Oh, nice size.
Okay. Yeah, it's big. It's heavy too. Yeah, and it has 33 1/3 capability, which is it's kind of a planetary gear set. It's not gears, it's balls underneath, built into the bottom of the turntable.
Right.
And it's got the recording thing. Use only when recording, it says.
That's the weight.
Yeah.
Could you pan down just a little bit? Pan down just a little.
Is that better?
Much better.
Good. Okay. So that's a 12-inch disc, RCA Victor Company Limited, Montreal. And I have others here on the table. These are ones my father had. And Victor Talking Machine Company of Canada Limited, Montreal. That one. Can you see them?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I think all those ones are, because I know exactly when he bought this machine and how much it cost, but I don't have any information on the actual records, because he was a singer and he wanted to make records at home. So that's what these are. So I've got about a dozen of them. And of course, when we were kids, we used to put it onto the radio recording, and we'd record over some of the stuff that my dad did. So yeah, it's terrible, but kids do that, you know. But anyway, it's unfortunate. You spend the rest of your life trying to make up for the mistakes that you made. I remember the first time we found his collection of records, which was absolutely wonderful. And my brother, who has just passed away at age 80, we got them out and we spread them out all over the floor and walked on a lot of them.
Oh no.
But we didn't know. But some of them survived, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to replace the ones that we wrecked, and I've done a pretty good job so far. But it's a never-ending job.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn, isn't it?
Yeah, that is.
It is, unfortunately.
So Paul, you answered sort of another question I was thinking of. Can you record over these discs? So I guess because it was a soft vinyl or whatever it was made of, you probably couldn't erase it.
Yeah, they're still quite flexible.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I could do that now or not, but certainly the radio recording system still works, and because it's got like a view meter on it, and you can see that. You can put your finger on the stylus when it's on, and you can feel the vibrations. They're quite good. But I don't know. I haven't been able to get the microphone to work, and I suspect that maybe the carbon in the microphone has just hardened up. And I said, maybe bang it around a little bit, you know, like you do with fire extinguishers. Maybe that would make it work.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna.
But who but collectors would be keeping this stuff and saving it from destruction? This is a really interesting discussion and amazing to see the stuff that Paul has, that Jeremy has mentioned, that others have mentioned. It's just fascinating and so great that this community is keeping these items alive. You know, they're not disappearing because, as you know, they're very, very ephemeral things. Many of them they could disappear and be thrown. It's like, anyway, I just had to comment because I just love that. It's great.
Thank you.
Very good point, Chris.
Thanks.
Mike, speaking of re-recording, in the early 40s, when the CBC ran the Great Gildersleeve drama series on radio, these came out on 18-inch discs, and they had to be sent back to CBC because they used that material to over-record.
Oh, okay.
I have two of these discs. I have two of these discs that didn't get sent back, and they were meant to raise money for the war effort.
Right. I think you played them in your video. We showed that here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Any other comments from anyone before we wrap this up?
I've got one more, Mike.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I just discovered a disc I forgot about. It's this one from the sensation of the 1934 World's Fair. Millions will buy them for personal recording. This is called the Record Your Voice, Say It, Mail It, and it's made out of aluminum or aluminium. And it says only fiber needles can be used.
Oh.
Which kind of relates to what we just had a discussion about with fiber needles. But I actually have the little packet of fiber needles with it too.
Excellent.
And they're a little bit different. They have, instead of just being a typical fiber needle, triangular, this one actually has a circular shank.
Oh. That's
been cut into it so that you can actually load this into the regular Victor stylus that doesn't have that triangular chuck.
Right.
And yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I should throw that in there.
Good point. Yeah, I have to sign out now, but wonderful meeting. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, I was going to wrap up this section of our presentation for today. Hope you enjoyed the videos. Quite a variety of topic, and I'd love to get everybody jumping in and giving their input as well as showing some things from their collection too. So please keep it up. And we're going to take a short break now and then come back and do our auction. So we'll be back. It's about almost 3 o'clock Toronto time, so around 3:05. Thank you.
How many items today? Just wondering.
Well, most people who are watching this now probably have an extra copy of a record that they could maybe part with, or maybe you bought a bunch of records or whatever and you don't want or need it anymore. So this is a great place to try to sell it. So again, we invite you. There's no fees associated with selling anything today, and it's really just to help each other out. So that'll conclude our meeting for today. I wanted to thank everyone for being here today, and also for the people who did the presentations and put together videos for us and helped out. We're always looking for more such videos and things to have in our next meetings. And the next meeting will be on June 5th, and that'll be the last one before the summer. So again,
Mike Bryant, by the way,
yes,
Mike,
Richard.
I forgot to ask you, Mike Bryant and Bill Pratt, what happened? Are they okay? I didn't see them today. Are they okay?
Mike is fine. Mike's off at he had another function to attend.
Oh,
and Bill was here earlier.
Was he? I don't know why I didn't see him. That was it. That's all I wanted to say. But thank you so much for the meeting.
Thank you for attending, Richard. And thank you everybody else for attending too. I enjoy doing these Zoom meetings, and I hope you enjoy them too. And keep spinning those records and enjoying the hobby. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.